All right, so we are in New Hampshire today. We are at the American Independence Museum. What was the year of this house? Do you remember? Where'd you
No.
go? 17 something.
something.
All right, so let me see here. I'll put
Here's the timeline.
I'll put pictures of this. We'll take pictures of this and post this in the video as well. That way you guys can read it if you're interested. Or if not, you can just zoom right through this. Timeline of the Lad Gilman House, 1721, 1747. So there's the house right there. We're not sure which door to go in yet. All right. There's a university over there. This town has got some serious. This is Exeter, New Hampshire. It's got a lot of historical buildings in it. It's unreal. All right, we'll see you in a few.
I'm gonna say this one probably.
Yeah.
This is the original.
Oh, some of the original lumber of the house. Those old nails. All right.
So this is the American Independence Museum in Exeter, New Hampshire, and the structure that the museum's in is called the Lad Gilman House, and that was constructed in 1721. The Gilmans were a wealthy, politically involved family, particularly during the American Revolution here in Exeter and the seacoast. And during the American Revolution, Exeter was the capital of New Hampshire. It had originally been in Portsmouth, which is like a seaport. But there was fear that the British would have easy access to attack via sea. So up the river they came just a little bit to Exeter, and it was a much different community back then. It was actually a seaport. If you do look out the window, you'll see that there is a river, and that is the Tidal River, so it had access to Great Bay and then to the Atlantic. So you still had that access to the outside world here, but it was farther inland, so it wasn't like in direct line of attack.
Could they bring ships up the river?
They could.
Wow.
It was significantly deeper than it is now. There actually was shipbuilding that took place here. They weren't like the huge ones that probably would have come from England, but they were sailing vessels that were being built here and coming up and down the river. So that's kind of why here. And as you go through, this museum is not a house museum, so it's not just the story of the Gilmans and their family, though that's intertwined. It's more about the story of the Revolution and kind of Exeter's involvement, New Hampshire's involvement in the Greater Revolution. So there are a plethora of objects throughout the house that kind of tell that story. And also an interesting anecdote or kind of tie-in is that this property is owned by the Society of the Cincinnati. Have you heard of
No.
that? So following the American Revolution, some of the higher up members of the Continental Army kind of got together and said, we really need to form like a group to get together yearly to commemorate the sacrifice and the service that we, put forth to have America gain its freedom and kind of to honor and remember why we're here. It was slightly controversial because it was only allowed for the members of the Continental Army, so militia, folks who were in the militia were not allowed to join. But eventually it was kind of put together, and George Washington was actually the first kind of president of the Society of the Cincinnati. It's named after Cincinnatus, who was a Roman senator, I believe, who was honored to be part of the Senate and be a leader, but really just wanted to be a farmer. And so it kind of highlighted those ideals of everyday regular people coming up, taking control and having some say in the government. But just being regular old, tiny folks. So it's kind of the idea of the group. And it still exists today. It is a hereditary organization. It was for the firstborn male for many years, and now since many lines have gone, they've changed it down so that if you can prove any relation to a member of the Continental Army, though it is still a male society. And they actually own this building and the Folsom Tavern, which is just down the hill there, which is where the Society of Cincinnati of New Hampshire was founded. So they own both structures, but the museum's a separate 501c3. So that's kind of a little bit about the museum and kind of a quick general overview. But if you have any questions as you go through, please let me know, and I'd be glad to answer them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a quick,
Appreciate it. Yeah.
quick rundown, just to give a little context and framing of what you're seeing.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, we'll walk through, check it out. Yeah, so right here is the museum,
Oh, okay.
and that's how close we are to the water.
The ocean?
I don't think it's the ocean, but like over here, like she was saying, you come up the port right there, up through there, and the left, and come right over here to where Exeter's at.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Well, I'm Scott River in the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh, that is the Atlantic?
No, it might be the river. I think it's the river.
Okay.
But it's close to.
Well, you definitely wouldn't want to get hit in the butt with that thing. I think that was for like raking wool. Oh, look at the cast. Oh, wow. Kathy, look at this.
My phone is acting.
I have one of these at home. Your Aunt Brenda gave us that, and it's got the candle in it, and there's how you raise the candle
Yeah.
up. Wow.
Here we go. Now it's not right now.
Powder horn.
Huh?
The powder horn from,
Yeah.
from 1756. The Bible box.
My phone storage is full. I cannot get any more pictures. Do you have your phone?
You do? Do you want to use it?
Yeah.
Okay. Here you go.
Where's my purse?
I don't know. Did you bring it in?
I thought I did.
We'll go in there and look, see if you set it down. Oh, the jail. Okay. The jail room. Kind of hard to zoom in on it. It's so close. We'll put a picture in there.
Take a picture.
Okay. This is the jail room. Wow, I have to step up to come in here. Oh, plaster walls.
Must be they chained them to this or something.
Oh, yeah, look at that. He must have been a small guy if that was his apron. For the Masons out there, that's pretty cool. It's a Masonic apron.
1770.
Wow. George Washington mourning ring.
If you're interested, it's another fee, but we do have a tavern tour going on at 11 o'clock. So they're just popping down now, and sorry I didn't think to offer that to you earlier.
Tavern?
Do that?
Where's that at? That-
Right over the building.
It's like right down the, yeah.
Okay.
It's gonna start with like 4 minutes.
Okay.
And I just started heading down now. I apologize, I didn't
No, you're good.
We had a little crazy morning where
Okay, so we're going to the tavern now. We're going to go do a tour in there. Make it over these carpet remnants. It's a beautiful building. Okay.
Stop in, have a beer, whatever, have a meal. The man who built this was Colonel Folsom, and he built it up there where that band shell was, specifically to be a tavern, a nice high-end tavern. And you can see, even though he lived here with his family, you can see this is amazing, like no tavern I've ever been in. And that's the original door, and everything about it. We'll talk more about that when we get inside. But it's a marvelous thing. And you can see George Washington was entertained here about a year after he was elected president. So we'll talk about that as well. Tavern. Colonel Folsom, a colonel from his time in the militia, not the Continental Army, but was one of the big shots in town along with Mr. Gilman, who, the Lad Gilman House is the museum we just came from. So they were buddies, I'm sure. Like I said, outside the tavern used to be 2 or 3 blocks up the road, was moved here, moved several times, ended up here in the 1940s, 1920s. So Colonel Folsom built it to be a fancy place. You can read something about the tavern. We don't know a lot about it. In those days, they didn't really keep track of how things were built or what they were done, but we know a lot about other taverns, and so we assume some things. But this would have been remember, this was the family lived here, Colonel Folsom, his wife, and 4 children. I'll show you where we think their bedroom was. And it also was licensed for 17 people to sleep overnight, like a B&B. So this is where they would have come in, maybe got acquainted, talked politics, got their food, their beer, whatever, and then went into the next room where they'd be eating. But the fascinating thing is that he built this thing in 1775. So what happened in 1775? Lexington and Concord.
Yeah.
The war started, so, and now, there were patriots, loyal to the king. The patriots wanted some kind of more independence, not necessarily to kick the king out and leave, but variations of that, and the loyalists loyal to the king. So Exeter was pretty much a patriot community. Mr. Gilman up there and Mr. Folsom were patriots, trying to do some kind of independent movement. So he would have been hosting people from all walks of life in here. And can you imagine the talk they had? You love King George, you hate King George. Man, I don't know what happened in this room, but this would have been pretty exciting times. 1775. He lived until 1790. His wife took over, and in those days, this is really interesting. Women were mostly excluded from most professional walks of life. No military, no business, no voting. You all know that stuff, okay? But they could own taverns. And I don't really know why, except I'm assuming they must have did most of the work anyway. Hosting, cooking, whatever. So when he died, Mrs. Folsom took over and she ran it. And you'll see the old maps, they say Widow Folsom's Tavern. And you can see the similar thing in other other taverns. This wasn't the only tavern in town, but it was the fancy one. Right down there where I showed the four of you, facing, well, two directions, but it's facing that's the main square of town now. It was even then, okay? So this was where they came. Now, this building was built in 1775. In 1929, it had many lives in another location, in addition to a tavern. In 1929, it was sold to the, I think, Mobil Oil Company. They wanted to build a gas station. So the present owner, who sold it, then sold the building itself for $1 to a military organization called the Society of the Cincinnati. Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
Okay, it's the oldest. You have, good.
Yeah, I'll bring that up.
Yeah.
She just explained it to us.
Exactly. The Society of Cincinnati is the oldest military organization in the country, formed at the very end of the Revolutionary War by and for Continental Army officers only. We'll talk a lot more about when we get to the museum later, those of you who are coming along. Anyway, so they bought the thing in 1929 to save it, because it was going to be destroyed to make a gas station. And they moved it to basically our parking lot right over here. And a family called the Stearns family lived in it for a number of years and renovated it and put in modern plumbing, modern for the 1940s. But moved again from there to here in 2004, and 3 years of renovation. In 2007, it joined our museum building. Hi, folks. And became a part of our museum and our tour. Come on in.
Sorry, we're late.
Come on in. Which is it? Hi there. Where are you folks from? The walls are 1775. Okay? These floors are white pine. New England was covered with white pine. It was coveted by King George the Third of England for all of his ships. He had over 700 ships, military and commercial, on the ocean during the 1770s. So this is white. It doesn't look white. I'm assuming it never did look white, but then in renovation it was all surface and stuff. We still have the square head nails. If you like to look around at windows and stuff and doors, you can ask me about them if you want. But one thing to think about, not all the floors are 1775. One clue is that you see none of these things are the same width, but they didn't waste their timber. They used what they had. This is one indication that this is old white pine. Right? One more thing about white pine. King George reserved for himself all the white pine greater than 24 inches in diameter for use in his ships. And England had basically been denuded for this very reason for centuries. So he coveted all this stuff, and New England was covered with white pine. It still is in a lot of ways. So he had a surveyor of the woods, whose job was to make sure nobody cut down the king's timber of that size or had planed lumber of that size. You will find some greater than 24 inches in this house. Not necessarily on the floor. It shows you that it took some courage to have something like that in your possession, especially in 1775. So Colonel Folsom, somebody said, was a patriot, and I guess he had a little courage as well, if that's what it is. Okay, the fireplace, I told you it got moved, the building got moved 2 or 3 times. The last time in 1929, right up Water Street, 4 days. The fireplace did not survive. We know this is original stuff. This is not. I can't tell you anything else about it now. The fireplace is smaller than it was. Otherwise, it's, I've told you what the age of the room is. So it's a very old house and got a lot of cool stuff in it. So let's head out. I haven't had this big a tour in forever. We were closed down for a year, so this is my 3rd time back after.
Oh, really? Oh, great.
I've done a lot of years, but.
You weren't open in August, I think, when we wanted to come out. I don't think you were.
Correct, we started September
Right,
1st,
yeah.
I mentioned the tavern was built by Colonel Folsom to be a fancy, nice place, and there's some indicators of that. One is, and if any of you are builders or wood people, to speak up. This is called 9-point crown molding, and I've tried unsuccessfully to count 9 points. I'm
Oh, I
close.
want that high.
So, but that's indicative of the care that he took, and it could have been just a point up there, I suppose. So that's throughout much of the house. The ceilings are relatively high, particularly for a tavern. Remember, this is mostly a house. And other things you'll see, some of the windows and the situation, this configuration is not unusual, but it indicates, you know, a desire to have an outlet. Okay, there's a big piece of wood here somewhere. Anybody find it?
I know it's nice. Oh, that's wonderful.
If you're comfortable, I'm proud. Okay, those of you who were with me, that's the big fancy door that we saw from the sidewalk. And it's big and fancy in here too. This is the original door and all the original hardware. This is what the guests would have encountered, like this grand staircase, the original, I think this is cherry. Fancy place, he intended it to be. And also, again, this was all renovated in the 1940s and 2004 to 2007. So this is all, was revealed, I guess is the right word. This is, as you can see, quite fancy. There's some wallpaper there in a big circle. You can look at it a bit later if you want to. It was discovered in one of the renovations. It was underneath something they uncovered. And it was, interestingly enough, it was upside down. It was upside down. No one knows why. We know almost nothing about this tavern. And so when we didn't, I guess it wasn't salvageable, but anyway, I think you'll find that thing is upside down, the presentation, so. You know.
Maybe they were drinking.
The wife liked it better
You know,
that
That could
way.
happen.
I
The
learned
wife liked it better that way.
Yeah.
I learned a lot of things from my guests, and I never heard that before.
Leave it to Oklahoma.
Yeah. So Colonel Folsom, there are Folsoms around, and they come here every year and have a family reunion of sorts. And this is their crest, and I think maybe that's an announcement about the family reunion, so they come here. I've never met them, but they're active and they have an association. Anyway, we're gonna head on in here.
That was all done by hand, think about that.
I feel that I'm rushing a bit, and that's kind of intentional. Normally I would have time for a lot of questions, because I gotta do another tour up here at noon. So, but not to kick you along, but if you have a question, ask it, okay? More 9-point, that thing slides open. Like that. Okay. I'm afraid to pull it any farther than that. Here's another white board. These, I think these are called pilasters. Been too long. Another indication of fanciness. So this is we call that the small parlor we just came from, the other room, which is where they would have eaten, we assume. And this is a large parlor, also with eating and entertaining or whatever. Again, neither one of these rooms we think were inhabited by the Folsom, but this is for the guests. So interesting thing happened here though. When George Washington was elected in the fall of 1788, then a year later, I think December of 1789, he came with a small group of people, like a couple of people, and people to carry his bags, and he toured his northern states to encourage them to, stay for the program or whatever, and thanks for voting. Who knows what he really said. He was supposed to be here in the evening, and Folsom and Gilman, we had a big shindig planned for him. We don't know much about it, except he got there too soon. And he showed up, and the legend says he rode over the hill, and I'm here. So they hastily put together what they called a small repast. It was in mid-morning, I'm assuming it was a brunch. So he did his thing, and one of the daughters of the Folsoms served him. And all we know is he complimented her on her service and her demeanor or something. So that's as famous as we get with George Washington. But that happened in this room. Okay.
The glassware from that era also, sir, pretty much?
Pardon me?
The glassware of that era also, obviously, or?
No, that's reproduction, yeah.
Oh, that's not known.
Yeah, something else to know. The museum, we have a lot of old 18th century artifacts. And we have security and No one ever leaves there. You can tour the place by yourself, but you couldn't get out. Here, we don't have that, okay? And the reason is, we don't have a lot of really expensive old stuff here. It's all reproduction of whatever, I mean, who knows, that maybe 1950s, who knows? So, but we, in any event, we don't, I won't be talking about a lot of cool things like the Declaration, the Constitution. On the other hand, you can't come here by yourself, as opposed to up there, okay? We think this is where the Folsom slept. They had 4 children, a boy died very young, 3 daughters. This place was licensed for 17 people. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get upstairs. But they had to sleep somewhere, and we guess it was here because you want to be able to greet the guests and not bother incoming in the middle of the night, that kind of a thing. So we don't know what this room is used for, except perhaps for the bedroom. What we use it for is education purposes. We have a lot of, we used to have in May and June, about 900 fifth graders come through here in waves. And this is where we did some of that teaching. We also got to be in the museum too, but this is where we played with reproduction toys and all kinds of stuff. And the most interesting thing was a little demonstration we used to have right here, a magnetic board with jobs of children. So did any of you have children, I assume? Boys and girls? Okay, those of you who have girls are going to be amazing about this story. Because it's a boy and girl column. And then I would hold up and it would say, hunt bears. Everybody said, oh boys. Wash dishes, oh girls. There's dozens and dozens of these things. I never got to the whole board. It quickly became apparent the girls had a lot more jobs to do than the boys. I mean, 3 to 1. And these little fifth graders, girls, their eyes would start to get kind of funny, you know. They got it. So that's the fun I used to have in here. Do you know about a rope bed?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Who does not know about a rope bed?
I do not.
Oh, okay, I'll tell you. I used to own a real rope bed. This is a, I don't know what it is. It's not, certainly not the 18th century. You have to come around here and watch what I'm going to do. In lieu of wood slats or springs, now they just strung the rope like this, and that's how they supported themselves. Okay? If this was, we have another rope bed that's no longer on display up here that has, they call it a key. It's a wooden handle, and it would tighten the ropes or loosen the ropes.
Okay.
Hence the name Sleep Tight. So anyway, that's yeah, it's a fascinating thing. I used to own one and I made a mistake and sold it. Water under the bridge. The state of New Hampshire, and one of the 26 original first drafts of the Declaration of Independence.
Oh, cool.
Okay? So we'll talk more about that when we go upstairs. All right? So that's what that is. Okay, here we go. We're not going in here, but I'm going to have you look in there while I talk a little bit, so you can glance and hang out. Music involved, and we assume maybe they would have slept in here. There's another bedroom over there that we won't go in. So taverns in those days were, we can scoot in here now. Taverns in those days were regulated, much like they would be today. This tavern, like I say, 17 people. You had to be able to, of course, feed people. Had to provide a livery stable for their horses and other animals, and things like that. Okay, so they were regulated as was this place. This is the large meeting room. It could have had dances, a town meeting, all. Exeter was one of the 3 largest towns in New Hampshire at the time. This is the late 1700s, about 1,600 people. And it doesn't seem large, but it was a long time ago. So when a town was established, you had a church, usually, right away, and a meeting house, and taverns. And the houses come next, that's the way it was. So this was a big room for the meeting. Who knows what they went on here. This is probably where George Washington would have had a nice evening meal if he had gotten here on time. So more of the same molding. You may have noticed all the rooms have fireplaces, for obvious reasons. This one has one fireplace for all the big long rooms. I want to point out to you this room here. We don't know about this tavern or house, but we know that in that period of time, buildings, taverns, community buildings did have this, but sometimes a slightly deficient, because the fireplace is mostly down here, and it would certainly not waste all the heat if they didn't have the need to use it. So it's one of the other interesting things, and we're kind of guessing about it, about the tavern. Let me see.
It's an old cannon there, huh? It's plugged off at the end. Wow.
That was unnecessary.
Yeah, it was.
Very cute little town.
Yeah. So we made it to the Atlantic Ocean. Ocean even a word? We're gonna call it an ocean. Can't really see that ship out there. Here in Hampton, New Hampshire. I really want to see that ship out there, but I can't zoom in that far.
Yeah.
Gotta go touch the Atlantic. Oh, shit. Almost got soaked. Wait for a big wave to come in. Oh, there's a plane coming. I see it. Here comes the big waves. That'll push the water up here. Maybe not. As soon as you walk down there, it's gonna... Look at the waves over there. There's a big wave. Here it comes. Take your shoes off.
That's incredible.
Oh man, look at that wave.
Oh, that was shoes wet.
Ah, my shoes. Don't fall.
I'm not going very far.
Stand right there. It's coming. There you go. Kathy can say she stood in the Atlantic Ocean. It's cold? What's up? Relax, it's not a bee. Well, we got soaked.
Now my shoes are wet.
I'm soaked.
Are you?
Yeah, my feet got soaked. At least they're clean. Just videoing. We don't get to the ocean much. Oh, that's interesting. My feet are soaked. Ooh, lobster craws. Crab legs. Okay. Yeah. When you're not looking is when the waves get you. When you're not looking is when the waves get you. Beautiful little strip right here. Waves are something else. Not very big, I wouldn't think. Here's a Bentley. Nice. All right. There's your old truck over there.